This episode is brought to you by Experian. Are you paying for subscriptions you don't use but can't find the time or energy to cancel them? Experian could cancel unwanted subscriptions for you, saving you an average of $270 per year and plenty of time. Download the Experian app. Results will vary. Not all subscriptions are eligible. Savings are not guaranteed. Paid membership with connected payment account required.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to The Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Danny, and today we have such a special guest on our podcast. So, Tyler is the Fittest Flat Earther on social media. He's always sharing really, really good things that you guys will want to see. I'm sure, and actually, many of you have already sent me things on Instagram and TikTok that are his videos. So, I found him when I was doing my research for Flat Earth, and I love everything he's posting. He's posting things that make a lot of sense. But of course, they're conspiratorial, so people get a little up in arms. But I am so happy to have him on, and I hope you enjoy. Hi, Tyler. Thank you so much for coming on The Rabbit Hole.
Oh, no problem. I'm always excited to come on a podcast and have conversations with people that are open-minded, because I don't get a lot of that in my everyday personal life.
So I found your social media when I was doing my Flat Earth episode. Imagine that.
That makes sense. And what did you find me on TikTok? Was that the first place you found me?
No, I don't actually think I follow you on TikTok. I'm really new to TikTok. I found you on Instagram.
Okay. That actually surprises me, because right now on Instagram, I'm losing followers like every day, and they have me on a 2-month ban where they're not letting any new people find my account. They literally sent me something saying until September, I think, we are not allowing your content to reach new viewers.
That's ridiculous. So if I share your stuff, can my viewers see it still? Like if I share it to my story?
Yes, I think that can happen, but they're not, I've done some videos the past couple of weeks where I think normally they would have gone pretty viral, or at least gotten more than the exact amount of followers I've had. Like, no video I've had has gone more than how many followers I currently have. I think if someone does share it or puts it in their story, then it is getting viewed, but yeah, they're not letting it go in the For You page whatsoever. And to me, that's Instagram is so censored. And, I'm a big, I have 10 times more followers on TikTok than I do on Instagram. And I think that's because at one point TikTok was not being censored. And I think that's really the big push to create the lie that China's stealing your information and scare people away from TikTok, was because too much truth was getting out. That's where TikTok is a big place where I kind of had my awakening, because you could find real flat earth information. So anyway, I'm surprised you even found me on Instagram, is what I'm kind of getting at.
I did my Flat Earth episode in May, I think. So I think it was before your ban. But also I was specifically looking for Flat Earth Instagrams. And your handle is the Fittest Flat Earther. And so that obviously it made it easy to find you. But I just got on TikTok recently because I was trying to grow my following for my podcast. I only have 200 followers over there. And it's funny because yesterday I tried to post a video and they said that it was against the rules or whatever. I don't know what all the rules are because I'm so new. And then I tried to redo the video and post it again. It was about like the Trump assassination attempt, there's a tweet that came out at 6:12 saying like it was Mark Violets, this is the guy that did it. He's been arrested, blah blah blah. But the shooting happened at like 6:10. So I'm like,
Yeah.
that doesn't make any sense. Obviously, we know now that it wasn't Mark Violets, but like I tried to share that to TikTok and they didn't let me share it. And then today I posted a video on TikTok and it has one view and it was like my personal page seeing my business page. So I was the only view. And I was like, what
Oh,
the heck? Is it because
yeah.
I'm posting like controversial things? I don't really know.
Yeah. Well, it's the platforms are so funny because, and this, this is my opinion. This is what I've experienced the past couple of years is that TikTok they have a lot of guidelines and different parameters you have to follow. That's why, like, if you notice my videos, like at the end, I always say this for entertainment purposes only.
Yeah.
Like that was kind of my way to say, hey, and I wink at it. And like that came out of me naturally. Cause like the first time where I was actually saying something that I believed in, but I wanted to say it was entertainment purposes to get around the moderators, like my natural response is to like, I'm always an honest person. I can't not be honest. So I was like, it just like came out of me. I'm like, I don't want to lie. So TikTok will censor what you release. They won't let things out. Like, just like you said, I've had a lot of trouble getting things out. But once you get them out, anyone can see them. Videos can go viral. Anyone will see them. Where I think Instagram, YouTube, Facebook is the opposite, where they won't tell you can't post something. Like it's rare on Instagram, hardly ever, if ever, that it says you can't post this. But what they do is they just don't let people see it. So
They're like
it's
shadow
like,
banning you.
yeah, exactly. It's all they all have a different type of control system. At one time, TikTok, I think, was just they were letting people post anything and they were letting people see it. So that's, I think it was kind of intentional that they let TikTok kind of blow up to release a certain amount of truth. And, if a certain portion of the population is hearing this stuff and believing it, just another way to divide us because the other portion isn't hearing what they're hearing and then they argue. And, it's all a system to divide us against each other.
Well, and the more they divide us, the easier they can control us, right? So
Yeah.
it makes it easy where they're like, well, we can control the population better if they all hate each other or they think that the other people hate them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So, how did you
I,
come to be a flat earther? Were you always a flat earther?
oh no, I thought flat earth was the dumbest thing I've ever heard of for, you know, so let's go back to, I've probably only been a flat earther for a year and a month, maybe 13 months.
Okay.
So let's go back 2 years ago. And this is before I'm going down any rabbit holes. This is before I'm a conspiracy guy. Like, I had some knowledge that 9/11 wasn't what I thought. And I was a strength and conditioning teacher for 20 years. So I was in the know of like the health industry and nutrition and like the nonsense of the food pyramid, but I never like dove down rabbit holes. But like 2 years ago, I kept seeing Behind the Curve documentary on Netflix, which was a documentary talking about flat earth. And I just kept seeing it. And I remember telling my wife, I was like, I think I need to watch this just to see how one person in this day and age can still think that the earth is flat. Like, I just was like, in my mind, I was like, oh, these are just uneducated morons. So I watched it wanting to see, I was like, I just want to see one reason why someone could still think that. And I watched it and, like at a certain point, something came up about flight patterns. And I was like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. That doesn't really make sense unless like the earth is flat. But then by the end of the movie, they like corrected that and had an explanation for it. And then at the very end, they like make flat earth look really dumb because the flat earthers themselves are like, well, that's strange that the lights didn't line up. So I put flat earth in like the back. I was like, okay, flat earth is the dumbest thing ever. Never thought about it again. And then around this time last year, I started to kind of go down those rabbit holes. I think for part of it was for a distraction because I don't have kids. I'm a dog dad. Around this time last year, I had 4 dogs and one of my dogs was 15 and he was kind of on his last leg. And I was born in a Catholic family, but quickly lost any sense of spirituality or belief that we're in a spiritual world. And I just, through science and education and indoctrination, I fully just bought the narrative that we're given about being evolved from apes and living on a globe and the Big Bang. And so because I just thought we were in this physical place and my dog's dying, I think I was kind of curious to see if there was more to this place that we live. And I started kind of investigating near-death experiences. And then I had some really bizarre things happen where I basically discovered through the only thing I can explain is like God tapping me on the shoulder and saying, Tyler, like you gotta explore the stars. And I can't explain the order of events that led me to it. That it literally just had to be like God wanted to wake me up. But I figured out that the stars weren't burning balls of gas like quadrillions of miles away. And that kind of unlocked my mind a little bit to question the narrative about where I thought we lived. And, I just kept kind of going down that rabbit hole and exploring, being able to, I lived by Chicago. So explored being able to see Chicago from 60 miles away across Lake Michigan, and just did the whole flat earth rabbit hole. And, once I came to that conclusion and realized that I didn't live on a globe and that God was real, which I didn't realize for, my entire life, I just felt this sense of duty and like there was a mission that I was supposed to be on to help other people see this. Because, if I was 42 years old and didn't believe in God because I thought I lived on a Big Bang, evolved from monkeys globe, then I'm sure there are millions, if not billions, of other people just like me that didn't realize we were in a created place versus just some random accident. So kind of long story short, Flat Earth was the dumbest thing ever. I did figure out that movie was just a mockumentary. And, when I look back at it, I was like, oh, that was created for the exact purpose of what it did, was to make me think Flat Earth was completely dumb. And it worked. It worked for a good year or so until I started exploring the stars.
I was going to say, I didn't watch that documentary on Netflix, but I try to stay away from the documentaries on Netflix, especially like when I'm researching. Wow, I can't say words today. Researching into different episodes. Like, Netflix is going to tell you what the narrative is.
Oh yeah. And I would go ahead.
Oh, I was like, oh, maybe I should go watch that. But you solidified exactly what I thought, which is I don't actually want to watch it.
No. I mean, if anything, like once you know what it is, it's almost comical to watch, because you can just be like, oh, like they're literally saying things that flat earthers don't believe in. That, like, the censorship of flat earth to me is almost insane, because they have literally fake people lying about everything. Like, the lie is so big that sometimes it blows my mind. And the internet is like the biggest part of that, because they will, if a random or any Joe Schmo goes and is like, oh, I'm curious about flat earth, and goes to Google, the first 10 things that come up are going to make flat earth look ridiculous. And they're going to give information that flat earthers don't even believe. Like if I were to type on Google right now, flat earth, I'd go to it. First, it would say flat earth is an archaic belief. People used to believe that. And, we are smarter now than we ever have been, which isn't true in my opinion. And then they'll go through a list of things that I, as a flat earther, don't even think. I don't think we're a disk floating in space and, elevating up at like 9 miles per hour. It's just the most ridiculous thing. So they do a good job, though, of kind of gatekeeping that, for sure.
I think it's funny to see the picture, and it's like round planet, flat Earth, round planet, round planet. I'm like, like, this isn't really what people think is happening, but I'm glad that like you get a kick out of it. Like, you think this is funny.
Yeah. Are you? Sorry. Are you full blown? You don't live on a globe?
No.
Where are you at?
The reason it took me, so flat Earth was my all-time highest requested episode. And I just kept putting it off, because I was like, I don't want to. Because when I research into a conspiracy theory, I fully buy into it for however long it takes me to research. And then after I'm done, I've posted my episode, whatever, then I can make my own decision. But for
Right.
that time frame, I fully buy in because I feel like I do my best research. I find all the best information for whoever wants to hear it when I'm bought in. And I just wasn't ready to buy into flat earth because I was like, this is dumb.
Yeah.
Like this, like people really believe this. This is stupid. And
Hmm.
then I did the research into it. And the more research I did, the more research, and actually during it, I kept finding people who are like, well, I didn't believe in flat earth until I started doing a little bit of research into it. And now I fully believe. So I have a hard time fully believing, but I don't think we live on a globe, but I don't necessarily, I, I don't know how to say this. I'm like 50-50. Maybe we live on a globe, maybe we live on a flat earth, but honestly, like, I don't think it matters. Like in my life, I don't know if it'll change my life right now. So I've stopped putting much thought into it. Similar
Yeah.
to like simulation theory, where like I can't think about that theory at all. I did an episode on it. It stresses me out. I'm like, you know what? There's a lot of conspiracies. Like but I do this where I like put all this information in my head about like the whole world's bad or the whole world's lying to us. And I like have to almost like unplug a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm more of a flat earther now than I was. I
Right.
think maybe I need even more research than I did, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And, that's such a big statement or question that people make just in the realm of flat earth is, does it really even matter? Like my mom has said it to me, probably 10 times the past year. And I'm like, no, like the shape doesn't matter at all. It's the fact that
The fact
the
they're
people
lying.
the people that you are believing have your best interest at heart are lying to you about something so significant that you can't even wrap your head around it. And, like once you know that they can deceive us about something so large, then, and it sounds like you already do a really good job of like doing some thorough research and not just believing the narrative that we were given. But there are a lot of people, and I was included. I was never like a guy that bought into government and politics and things like that. But I did think when I was researching things online that the information was not so biased and so controlled, and I didn't realize there was such an agenda behind it. And once you realize that, that was kind of one of the things that, like, other than standing in my backyard and being like, where the heck am I when I like really, because there's like a moment when you really know that you don't live on a globe spinning 1,000 miles per hour and that has all the things that the globe has, like, and it hits you for real and you don't question it. Like, it's like an out of body experience. But on top of that, what was also insane was realizing, like, I don't know where I can get any information that isn't lying to me. That was equally as discombobulating as finding out or realizing that I didn't live on a ball.
I think that's where I already know that they're lying to us.
Yeah.
So, like in some people's cases, I can see like having this big revelation, like, oh my gosh, like everything I know is a lie. But like I already, like, personally, I'm like, yeah, everything that they tell you is a lie. Like everything that they come out and say is not true.
Yeah.
You just
Right.
don't know what the truth is. You have to find it yourself, right?
Right.
So I think that like, yeah, that revelation didn't have to happen for me. So that's
Right.
where I like gave up. Not I didn't give up, but like I just stopped thinking about it. I'm like, cool, like there's some really compelling evidence that the earth is flat. If I put too much time into this, I think that it might drive me crazy as to like just how much a lie this is, like just how big it is. Because like forever we believed that the earth was flat. And then all of a sudden somebody was like, no, the earth is round. And now everybody thinks, oh yeah, the earth is round.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
It's
why?
it and like that's a unique situation, like for you, because everyone I know in the outside of the internet world, like in my personal life, none of them I would say are in your situation where they already know everyone's lying to them. Like everyone I
Right.
personally know, the teachers I worked with, my friends, my family, my ex friends who decided they couldn't handle me being a flat earther. They don't know that everything coming out of the magical TV is lying to them and controlling their mind. So for you, yeah, I could honestly see you being like, I don't know, you're like maybe the first person I've met where when you say that, you might actually be right. Like everyone else, I'm like, no, you just don't get it. But I like from your perspective, it makes sense. Although I'm curious your level of where you're at just on a spiritual level, because for me, I wasn't at all. Like I didn't think there was a creator to this place, and I know that's a super personal question, but you got me curious.
No, that's okay. So I am currently on a journey. I would call it a journey. I've started reading the Bible, but like this is all really, really new to me. So I grew up in a
Yeah,
family that like we're not religious. We don't believe in anything really, like whatever. And even like you asked me 3 months ago, I was like, oh no, I don't really believe in God. And I've gone to church a couple times in my life, but like I've never read the Bible. And then I I don't know. I don't think it was flat Earth. I think it was a combination of things. I think flat Earth played a part in it. Um, I think when I was doing research into an episode, and I don't remember if it was this one or a different one, I started realizing just how many things in the Bible have come true. Because my father-in-law has been like, "Hey, did you hear about this?" And he doesn't say it in like a believe in God kind of way, but he's like this. Oh, it wasn't flat Earth. I was like the um currents in the ocean, right? The
yeah,
ocean paths was mentioned in the Bible. My father-in-law brought that up because of a podcast he listened to, and it wasn't like a push God in your face kind of situation. He was like, "Look,
right,
like this is how they discovered the currents in the ocean." I was like, "Wow, that's really interesting." The more I researched into it, the more I was like, "Huh, that's really crazy how many
yeah,
things in the Bible have come true." So I was like, "I think I should start exploring." And also, I don't know, like I said, I'm on this journey, so maybe it's God. Like I feel this like deep like calling that I need to start exploring like different religions and not maybe not different religions. I'm only really exploring Christianity, but like different denominations, I guess, and like reading the Bible and trying to figure out what it is I actually believe. Because up until
yeah,
recently, like I didn't really believe anything.
yeah. That's exactly where I was at. Like I said, I was born into a Catholic family. I went to like Sunday school till I got confirmed in eighth grade. But you know, the only thing any of that did was actually push me away from it. So at 42 years old, I'm 43 now, but at 42 years old, like I didn't have any. I shouldn't say any. Like if someone a year and a half ago would have said, "Do you believe in God?" I probably would have said, I don't know, maybe like flip a coin. Maybe there is something more than this. Maybe God does exist. But I think at least 51% I was probably like, no, like evolution's true. When I die, I'm just buried and like I spend eternity rotting in the ground. And and my belief system now couldn't be anything further than that. And it's just funny that flat earth is what did that to me. Like I I believed that we were under a dome, or call it the firmament, and call it we are in an enclosed system. And I believed in giants, and I believed in dragons, and I believed all these different things, and I hadn't made the connection that they were all in the Bible yet. So like once I like came to all these things through my research, and then I was like, wait, they're also in the Bible. I'm like, maybe there's some actual truth to that book instead of it being just all metaphorical. Maybe the Bible is actually literal. So like that's where I stand now. Like I'm very new to the Bible. As much as I was born into it, the only time I touched a Bible until I was 42 was to like move it out of my way to sit down at like a funeral or a wedding or something. So I've been digging in, and I've learned a lot, and it's what resonates with me now as someone that has just come to research. Like that's all I've done the past year is deep dive into research about figuring out where we are, what this place is, who we are. So, and the Bible just continues to resonate with me.
Did you go back? I know a personal question, right? But did you go back to Catholicism or are like where do you land on like the denomination spectrum?
Yeah, no, I'm very anti-organized religion.
Okay.
I think God and the Bible are truth. I think, I'm a believer in Jesus, but I think organized religions, especially Catholicism, are I think that's the control system. I don't think the Bible is. A lot of people think the Bible is the control system, but I think, the Vatican and the Pope and the people in the religious organizations are, because like for me, even though they're preaching that stuff, they do it in a way that makes you not believe it.
Yeah. Hmm.
Like I was like, if I would have gone to Sunday school and all that, I called it CCD. I don't know what most people call it. And it wasn't Sundays. It was like Tuesdays after school. But, like if they were teaching me about that dragons were in the Bible and Titans and giants and, David killed Goliath and all these things, I would have bought in. But I swear it's set up in a way to turn you away. It's not set up in a way. And I think that's because like at the very top, we're living in a spiritual place here. And I think there's I think we're living in a time in the Bible that's referred to as Satan's short season, which is at the very end of the Bible when basically Satan's let out from the bottomless pit to deceive the nations for a short period. And, what better way to explain what's going on in the world right now with all the mocking of Jesus and the Bible and in Christianity, even in the Olympics, and all the satanic worship, all the musicians and all the actors, all like doing the six symbols and the eyes. And I mean, like we're living in a very Luciferian time. And to me, it makes perfect sense that we are actually that the spirit or in flesh of like Satan is actually here, like allowed to have this little season to maybe test us, maybe. And in my opinion, like God is allowing it for some reason. And maybe it's to test who his, true, true believers are, true warriors, true, however you want to refer to us.
That's interesting that you say that because I know, like, do you listen to the Sean Ryan podcast?
It's so funny you said that. I just yesterday, um, a gentleman who was on there reached out to me to be on my podcast, and he was on Sean Ryan for a 6-hour episode. Chris Beck, I don't know if you know who he is.
I don't know if I listened to that episode. If they're like really, really long, sometimes I don't listen to the whole thing. My
Yeah,
husband's a
well,
habitual listener. He listened to every
okay.
episode. I do not.
Yeah, well, it's just funny you asked because literally had never tuned in until yesterday. Chris Beck was a SEAL Team 6 member, Navy SEAL. He's been on Joe Rogan. He literally was transitioning from male to female. And then, and I'm paraphrasing this because I don't want to speak for him, but he basically came to flat earth and the realization of where we are and that God is real, and kind of stepped away from the transition that he was making and is now kind of trying to speak out against it, and not in a just in a way of informing people that, hey, like there's an agenda with this too. It's not, it's not just always that people are having these feelings. There's like an agenda pushing that as well.
Yes.
So sorry, I interrupted you totally.
No,
Yes,
that's okay.
I've listened to Sean Ryan.
No, it's just so it's funny that you say like that, like this, like Satan's what was it? Satan's shortstop. Okay,
Short season.
short season. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And so because several of his guests recently, and even Sean himself, they're like, I feel this pull towards God. And I was listening to that and I was like, Taylor, did you hear that? Like when you listened to his episode? He's like, yeah, I did. I was like, do you feel like that? Like, I feel this pull, like something is literally pulling me. So I'm wondering if it's like God's trying to pull the people that, I don't know.
Yeah.
Here I am just like,
yeah, Danny, I can't, and like I say this saying I'm not special. I don't think I think we're all special. I don't think I'm more special than you or anyone else, but I literally think God tapped me on the shoulder and was like, Tyler, I need you to help wake people up for me. And like, I'm not saying I heard that voice, but like I was a teacher for 20 years and I had no idea that was grooming me to be a really good content creator, and that the content creation that I just happen to want to make is the ultimate goal is to wake people up to where they live so they can find God. So it's, I mean, yeah, I feel a strong pull, and I should tell a story. We can get into it like down the road, but remind me if I have like a really interesting story where God, I was like speaking to me through someone else that, but we'll put that on hold for a minute to finish where we're at. How long have you been doing this, the podcast?
2.5 years.
Oh, awesome.
This podcast for 2.5 years. We
Yeah.
had a podcast before this, basically since 2020. I've been podcasting.
Okay.
How long have you been podcasting? You're just new, right?
Oh, well, I did a podcast for like 3 or 4 months back in 2020 as well, but that was all about coaching and mindset and things like that. Nothing like what the one I'm doing now is. And yeah, we just last night recorded our 3rd episode, so it is brand new, called the Unchained Earth. Me and 2 buddies that are very like-minded and kind of like, I think even a lot of truthers think we like are a little out there because we just have such open minds. We don't hold it, we're like, if someone shows me something, I'm like, yeah, I can't rule that out. But a lot of people who are even awake to the craziness are like, nah, like I can't do that. So
I listened to the podcast before you were on it. So I listened to an episode after you told me that you were part of the podcast. I went back and I clicked on an episode. It was like a random one.
Yeah.
And I listened to the episode, but then I realized that you weren't a host on it yet. So I got through the whole episode and I was like, wait a second.
Yeah. So that's Ben had a podcast by himself called the Unchained Brain podcast.
Yeah.
And and I was on that as a guest, but then, man, the 2 of us just kept kind of vibing, and he really thought that I could add good value. And my other friend, Josh, was asking me to do a podcast with him. And I was like, well, why don't the 3 of us join? And Ben had no qualms kind of turning the podcast he already had from Unchained Brain to Unchained Earth. So yeah, now it's a trifecta every time.
Perfect. Yeah. So I'll have to go back and listen to an episode that you're actually on. That's not Unchained Brain.
Yeah.
But also I put in my headphones and I click on like a podcast or whatever, and then I mom, right? So I'm doing the dishes and I'm doing the laundry and the kids are screaming and I'm doing all these things, and then I get halfway through and I'm like, what did I listen to? So I back up. That's why it takes me forever to get through a podcast, I swear.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I completely ignore my kids because I'm so zoned into the podcast, and I'm like, is there a baby screaming?
Well, that's why yesterday I was like 6 hours. I was like, I don't know if I can. I was like, I'm interested in this guy, Sean Ryan, and the guy, Chris Beck, he's talking to, but I'm like, 6 hours. I'm like, I don't know. Usually I listen to a podcast when I go on a bike or a run. I was like, I'm not going on a 6-hour bike ride.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. Some people.
Yeah, I mean, I've done that before,
but. Okay, let's get into some giants. So you mentioned giants, you mentioned dragons, you mentioned obviously David and Goliath story. Can we talk about that a little bit and how there's evidence of actual giants and dragons on our Earth?
Oh yeah, let's definitely get into it. It's honestly probably my favorite topic because it just is mind blowing to me that, and I've gotten so deep into it that there's a lot of people that think that flat earther is more outside of outside of the ice walls, or that we're in under a dome, and then there's more than that. I 100% believe that, because some of the beings, giants, dragons specifically, that I have found on my own, I think I was the first person to ever find this dragon that is in Utah, and it's the size of the state of Utah. So to think that there were beings, dragons, giants that big, there's no way they were just confined to one, a globe, but two, what we think of as, even what flat earthers think of as where we live. There has to be more. And at some point, I think maybe there just wasn't the firmament above us. And, the place we live is so much crazier than what even most truthers think. But but yeah, like getting back to just specific giants and dragons, the evidence for dragons is, I mean, it's almost undeniable to the point where things like the dictionary, like early 1900s dictionaries talk about them being rare. The Chinese zodiac has 11 real animals and then just happens to have a 12th fake one as the dragon. They're mentioned in the Bible over 30 times. All sorts of, like, every ancient culture mentions dragons. And it's actually getting to the point now that it's honestly even hitting the mainstream. Not too long ago, there was, they said it was called a plesiosaur. They found this plesiosaur skull, and they found it up in oh man, like up in a mountain, and so like, and they were saying it was this water dinosaur. And when you look at the skull, I mean, it looks exactly like what anyone would think a dragon skull looks like, but they called it a plesiosaur, so they weren't fully ready to release it was a dragon. But then just a few weeks later, in on CNN in the mainstream, it talks about this 300 million-year-old dragon fossil that was found. And then I asked Alexa not too long ago, hey, Alexa, like, how many dragons have been found in the United States? And she says the amount of dragons found is rare. It was only like 5 or 6. And these, not mythical, but majestic beings are very not known because so few of them have been found. So like, I'm at the point, when I first started digging in, I was like, I don't know about this. And then the more you go, it's like, dragons, giants, and flat earth, to me, that's just what it is. It's not, to me, I'm not speculating. There's too much evidence, way too much evidence. And I speculate a lot, but those three things, there's literally physical and scientific, repeatable evidence that you can find on those. So it's so cool to me. And when I first went down the giant rabbit hole, it was just on the 12-foot, the 14-foot, the 18-foot. And like, I spent my time just trying to really hammer down if those existed. And then I got to the point again where there was no doubt. You can literally find dozens upon dozens and dozens of newspaper articles from the late 1800s, early 1900s of people unearthing giant bones from anywhere from 9 to 18, I think even 25-foot giants, remnants. And every single one of the articles will say, found by so-and-so, reported to the Smithsonian takes it. And then more times than not, there's an article that comes out like the next day that's like, oh, that was a hoax. So it's like, oh yeah, there was just this giant agenda to create fake giant remains and then play it off as a hoax. Like, so, and then, I mean, just the artifacts are everywhere too. I mean, you can find artifacts. That's something, for some reason, they don't hide a lot on the internet, but they were here. The small variety of giants, all the doorways from, old architecture you can see, but then the titans, the giants that were literally miles tall, is what really blows my mind.
Can we talk about those a little bit, the titans?
Yeah.
Like, you mean like the titans from like Greek mythology or like old mythology where they're like they were enchained and all, like those kind of titans?
I refer to titan as, like, for me, I say giant, and that just means like the 10 to 20 foot. But when I say titans, I'm more so just referring to the sheer size of them.
Okay.
And in the Bible, and even like in Genesis, very early on in the Bible, Genesis 6:4, it refers to the Nephilim. The Nephilim were the giants. They were the product of the fallen angels coming down and mating with human women. And when they mated, they created giants. And I don't, like, some people think it just sounds like such nonsense you could never believe. But, there's evidence that things like that have happened, where mating of different species causes something to happen where, like, the growth hormone just continues to be triggered and triggered and triggered. And so the giants, from my perspective, were the byproduct of angels mating with human women. And the Bible talks about them being here before the flood and after the flood, and it talks about them being a much bigger variety before the flood, to the point where it says, we were like grasshoppers in their eyes. There are a lot of, I think, Numbers 13:33 maybe is a good Bible verse that talks about that. But, and then again, like there's evidence. There's evidence upon evidence upon evidence. When you look at what some mountains look like literally mountains are petrified faces. And, you could say when you first start looking at it, you might think, oh, that's just pareidolia. That looks like it could be a giant lion there with its mouth hanging open. But then when you find it over and over and over again, and then you see things like, the like where Himalayan sea salt comes from and the pink salt that literally could be the insides of these titans.
Yeah.
It becomes pretty evident, and it sounds ridiculous at first, and that's where TikTok comes in. I think that's where I found a lot of that stuff. And, of course, like I'm someone that I don't just see anything anymore, especially now, and believe it, but you can do your research and you can find, when you find evidence after evidence after evidence, it becomes pretty abundantly clear that these things existed.
That's interesting because I have a really good view of the Rocky Mountains from my house.
Mm-hmm.
And straight ahead, like if I look like due west out of my house, they call it Sleeping Indian. I don't know if they call it Sleeping Indian Rock or mountain or what, but
Right.
it's a mountain formation that literally looks like a man laid down, crossed his arms over his chest, and fell asleep.
Yeah.
And it's been there forever, for as long as I can remember. Like
Right.
everyone's always talked about it. But like, could that have been a giant?
Oh yeah. I mean,
Like because that's how they stage people when they put them in coffins, right? Like yeah, like
yeah.
put your hands over your chest and then like that's what it looks like.
Right. And the biblical model of how they don't exist anymore is that and I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but I mean, if you are, I'll share it anyway, just for people listening. But um, when the Nephilim were created, from the fallen angels and the human women, these things got so big and they really started to just wreak havoc on the world. And they
Mhm.
started to, eat humans, and they were warring. They wanted to fight each other. They literally became cannibalistic. And that's kind of where the biblical story of the flood came in, is that, everyone's like, well, God, do you really want to worship a God that could kill off millions of people? And, the Bible says that everything became corrupt. It was all just, people that weren't becoming people because they were literally their DNA had been corrupt because they weren't humans anymore. They had all the DNA had mixed. The Nephilim were creating abominations, trying to mix human DNA and animal DNA. And so like when you see Egyptian hieroglyphics where there's like dog heads, like that isn't just a depiction. Those things, from my perspective, and even things I found, are very, very real. And it sounds so sci-fi, but that's just because we've been trained to think that stuff is sci-fi. But that stuff really existed. And I think the way they were killed off is a lot of them either drowned because of the flood or suffocated because of lack of oxygen. They used to be. Have you seen anything with the giant trees and how there used to be all these massive giant trees?
Yeah. Hmm.
And if you don't have those huge, massive trees to help produce oxygen, then you're not. The oxygen is not going to be as readily available. And if you're a massive 5 mile tall being, you're going to end up probably suffocating to death. So a lot of them, when you find them, I've done a post where they are literally like, almost like you said, like arms, not the arms crossed part, but they're laying and their heads back and their mouths hanging wide open. And it literally looks like
Like they
they
suffocated.
died gasping for air. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I guess I've seen a couple of your videos with
Yeah.
like because obviously you do pictures in your videos and I
Right.
just do audio. But I don't like it's very compelling. Like you look at these pictures and these videos and you're like, this is actually a human face. Like you can tell this is an actual face. It's just much larger than our face. Like,
Yeah.
but I have this theory. that none of these mythical creatures are actually made up mythical creatures, right? So,
Totally.
like giants and dragons, right? Where did we come up with these things? Like vampires, werewolves, like where did we think of this? Who thought of this and was like, oh, yeah, like a vampire, a human that lives forever and sucks your blood? Like, I have this theory that these aren't made up things, but it goes along with my theory about like them creating these movies to make us seem crazy when we're like, no, that's coming true. And they're like, no, 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 that's just a movie, right? Same concept. So you have a movie about a vampire and you're like, oh, vampires are real. Oh, that's crazy. It's just sci-fi.
Right.
Well, they created it to be sci-fi, so you didn't actually believe it, but it is real.
1000%. And, like I agree. The same thing is with Greek mythology. I think all of the Greek mythology is true. And that, like the Zeus and the Hercules and all that, like, I think those were the actual giants, the sons of either they could have been the fallen angels themselves, or they could have been the Nephilim. So, I fully agree with you. I don't, truth, they always say, is stranger than fiction. And I don't think, I realized that until a year ago. And yeah, I think they all exist.
Well, and I think it's funny how you like, and I've brought this up in several of my episodes, that there is a great flood in almost every like ancient text that you read. There's a great flood. So like,
Yeah.
and there's evidence of a great flood on our earth. There's no way you can say that there wasn't a great flood. But then there's like also in several ancient texts, you got like Greek mythology, you got the Bible, where they're like, you have the gods coming down to mate with the human women, right? We see that
Right.
in Greek mythology, we see that in the Bible, we see that in several different places where it's like
Right.
if it's written so many times, at some point we have to believe it.
Yeah. And then, what they try to do with that too, I think, is even try to use that in a different way to control our minds, saying that, the Anunnaki came from distant galaxies and planets, and they're who came, and, they create that narrative and they manipulated our DNA when, you know, my opinion, I like to say that just came from the spirit realm. That was up above, but much closer than they say, or in a different realm, not coming from scientifically impossible places like other galaxies, which don't exist from my perspective.
It's just crazy how much they try to manipulate everything, right? I feel like every time I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it's crazy they're manipulating it." And then also I'm like, I'm not surprised at all that they're manipulating
Yeah.
these things.
Yeah. Once, once I kind of woke up to flat Earth, and that is like, man, the rug was pulled out from under my feet. Just like for 2 weeks, I was like, where am I? What is this place? I didn't think I would experience that again. And then my friend Josh, who's on my podcast with me, started talking to me about how volcanoes are a hoax, and I'm like, what are you talking about? And I like had that moment where I'm like, yeah, of course. Like, not that they're not real, but they're nothing close to what they tell us, because if you don't believe in a globe, the lava is not coming from the molten core. And I'm like, oh, like I just had that moment again where I was like, I was surprised. And I'm always, as much as I was thrown off and it was difficult and just like such a intense, scary feeling becoming a flat earther, like at some point I'm also kind of like looking for that again. Cause that, like, I'm an adrenaline junkie. I love the rush. And even though that sucked going through it, I'm like, oh man, I don't think I'll ever go through something as intense as that again.
It's also really fun to know the truth. And like people can't handle it, right? So like you said, you've lost friends. I think that people can't handle the truth, and I think it's really hard. I think even, I mean, I do this constantly. You do this constantly, where you're constantly like looking at the truth and the conspiracy theory, quote unquote, right? But it's actually truth, and then like sometimes I have to just disconnect, like I said earlier, like because it gets to be so much where everything's fake, and you're like,
Yeah.
my whole world can't be fake.
I think, yeah, I don't know why, but I think I have a superpower with that stuff where, like, yeah, it did throw me off, but like I don't know, I can go down the deepest, darkest rabbit holes and I can do it all day and I come out unscathed. Like, for whatever reason, it's like I have this force field against going down rabbit holes. And I think it's a gift. For whatever reason, maybe it's just, so I can keep chugging along and plugging along and doing like all the videos I do. And, I think a lot of other people going down some of the rabbit holes I do as consistently as I do might find some darkness that they don't want. And like, that's not to say that I haven't had, like I did go through a point where I was getting spiritually attacked and things like that. But mentally I can handle it for whatever reason. And again, I'm not saying I'm special. It's just a gift I have.
I think that, like I said earlier, the simulation theory that one really, really got me. There are a lot, like I just covered Bohemian Grove, and I'm like, yeah, like whatever. Like I mean, it's as bad as you think it is.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, for sure.
Like so.
Right.
And I went in knowing that, whereas simulation theory, I actually didn't know much about it or the simulation argument. And after I came out of that, I was like, nope, that's not true. Can't believe that. Nothing about that can't be right. Nope.
At first, with the simulation theory, I didn't really come to that until after I was a flat earther, and I disregarded it right away. Especially when I was thinking about the way they were presenting it, coming from like computer simulation and things like that. But I have revisited it a little bit, and I do think there's a chance that it is some sort of simulation, but like a God created simulation, and maybe we choose to come here. We're souls, and we're like, hey, let's go experience all the emotions, all the craziness, and because there's a lot of people that just think we're, when we're in the spirit world, it's just all, we just feel the love and we feel connected to everybody. We don't have these crazy emotions. So I've entertained simulation, but like I said, it's God simulation, not some computer simulation.
So that's a different take on it. I guess I've never really thought of it like that.
Yeah.
Like when I did the episode, it was a computer simulation, and like
Right.
to me, I'm like, this can't be fake. The love I have for my family can't be made up.
Right.
Like I love them so deeply. Nope.
Yeah, right. That's why to me it resonates a little bit that, like almost like a holographic simulation, but like our consciousness is like projected down here. So it's what we're touching is just like all light and not physical and real, but it's still, but I don't, when I look at it from that perspective, I'm like, I could see that. Like God can do whatever he wants. Like God has shown me some crazy things the past year. I've called like orbs of light to me in the sky, and I've seen things in the stars. Like the experiences I've had, nothing would surprise me. So if God is like, yeah, let's just create the simulation down there for these souls to go and enjoy a little vacation or whatever it is, I could see it that way.
How does your wife feel about this? Because it's been so kind of new. How is she? Is she on board? Does she also think the Earth is flat? Like, how is she handling your transformation?
That's a great question. I'm excited to talk about it. It actually it leads perfectly into that story I wanted to tell too.
Perfect.
This, if I start going on this too long, feel free to rein me back in. But when my whole life, I've been like pretty cool, calm, collected person. When I tell people something, they genuinely believe me. I'm a rational thinker. I've got my master's degree, and I'm like, I was a teacher for 20 years. So when I kind of woke up to the craziness, and no one around me even like questioned 9/11 or anything like that.
Oh man.
And I started spewing all this stuff. People literally thought something was wrong with me, like I was delusional, or I had CTE, brain injury from my football days, or brain tumor. But to their defense, like I'm a fire hose, I'm a bull in a china shop. I'm Mr. Extreme. If I'm going into something, like I'm full in. So I was fire hosing everyone I knew, like they're all lying, the earth's flat, like there's reptilians, when I used to think they were like reptilians. So my life got a little crazy for a little while because everyone just thought I was crazy, and my wife was no different. And I'm like, Liza, you know me. Like, anything I've ever told you haven't looked at me in my face and been like, I don't believe you, or like something's wrong with you. So we struggled. Like, we struggled hard. And her and I usually don't butt heads. We don't argue. We don't fight. And there was a period of time where I think both of us thought we weren't going to make it through it. Like, we were going to end up divorced. And it took, like, I was losing friends. People were literally saying, they weren't even telling me they didn't want to talk. They would just ghost me. And I did have some people just walk out of my life. But one day last summer, my wife's father and her cousin came over, and we were in my backyard. I lived on water. I moved since then. And we were fishing, and I had no idea that her 22-year-old cousin was very awake to a lot of the craziness of the world. And I was telling him the story I'm going to tell you in a minute, and it had to, I said something about this shirt I was wearing, and he's like, well, what shirt were you wearing? And I was wearing a Flat Earth shirt, and I kind of like looked at my wife, and she's like, fine, you can tell him. I said it was a Flat Earth shirt, and I expected like some, pushback or like, you're really, but he was like kind of hip to it. And then he and I ended up having like an hour-long conversation about all these things. And her dad's like, well, what's Flat Earth? And we were like, well, it's the belief that we don't live on a globe and the earth is flat. And he was like, yeah, I don't know. He's like, I was always told that, but I could see that. So like, she witnessed 3 men having civilized, normal, rational conversation where until that point, she had only seen every single person thinking I was sick and something was wrong with me. So that brought her guard down a lot. And from that point on, like, we found our balance again, and we, like, we're totally good now. We literally moved to Florida from Chicago. Like, we're living, like, we're good. We're happy.
Good.
She still doesn't like to get into these topics. She doesn't like to talk about evil. She doesn't like to talk about the lies. So while she will watch some videos if I ask, took her a long time to kind of, even though she had let her guard down, it took her a long time to get to the point where she realized what I was saying wasn't completely crazy. She would now, like probably a month ago, she finally said, she's like super stubborn. So she will never, ever say I'm a flat earther, but she finally said, okay, I can at least admit now that I know we don't live on a globe, because she, I made her watch them. So while she wouldn't say she's a flat earther, she knows we're not on a ball spinning 1,000 miles per hour and 67,000 miles per hour and 400,000 miles per hour and all the things. So getting into the story a little bit. Well, first let me stop, just see if you have anything before I go on for another 5 minutes.
No, I'm surprised. I'm surprised it took her so long, but I also kind of understand, because like mob mentality. So like, of course she's gonna be like, well, if everybody thinks you're crazy, maybe he is crazy. Like, maybe am I blind to it because I'm so close to him and I love him so much?
That was her biggest fear. Her biggest fear was, and like, in her defense, I was manic for like a day here or there, a week. Like, I've never been someone manic in my life. And I was like, oh, this is what manic feels like. Or because at one point I was just like, I wasn't losing my shit because of what I was finding out. I was losing my shit because every single person I ever knew in my entire life that I was telling things to were looking at me like I was crazy. And I'm like, but I'm not crazy. I just figured some things out. So yeah, she was very concerned that what if, even though he's telling me he's fine, like a year from now, he dies from like having a tumor and his family would never forgive me and all that. So, but it's funny because so many people will reach out to me, and if I say a comment on one of my posts about my family not being awake or my brothers not believing, they're like, wait, your brothers don't think the earth is flat? And I'm like, no. They're like, but like, they're related to you and you like speak it so well. And I'm like, I think that, like, honestly, if a stranger went up and told them what I'm Like if it was my face presenting what I'm presenting and then they would watch it, or if it was a stranger's face over me, then I
Right.
think they'd buy it. But because it's like their brother trying to tell them there's a defense mechanism.
I have the
Uh,
opposite because my family, I grew up in a very conspiratorial family. And
oh
so
yeah.
like I tell them something, they're like, "Oh,
Oh,
okay. Yeah."
that's like the dream world
We
for me.
we
For
do
me,
have good discussions because like
yeah, that's
some
awesome.
things I'm like, look what I found. They're like, that feels really crazy. And I'm like, no, 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 no. And then we can get into it. And they're like, okay, like, yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So I've never experienced what you're experiencing.
Oh, it's crazy. It's literally crazy, especially and I grew up kind of like in a wealthy suburb of Chicago, so I think everyone's very educated.
Hmm.
Everyone's
Education
not
ruins you.
exactly. So like if you come from a wealthy neighborhood and then you are educated and you're around everyone that's educated and then you're teaching in education, like everyone has this sense of, well, I'm smart because I have an education. I couldn't possibly be wrong my whole life about something. So it just yeah, I think I was just in like the perfect storm of not one person I knew in my entire life could like resonate with anything I was saying. And it's kind of funny. My wife and I have this theory now that it really took the weight off my shoulders a lot because my family, not my brothers and my mom, still looking at me like I'm kind of insane, weighs on me. And we both kind of came up with this theory at one point where if it's like part of God's plan, and if my brothers and my mom were awake and understood everything I was saying, that I wouldn't have this burning just passion in me to spread it to the millions of people I reach on social media. And it's true. Like if they would just wake up, I'd probably be like, all right, I can like relax a little
Relax.
bit. That energy helps me focus it other directions.
That's kind of cool though, because you've reached so many people with your platforms. But okay, we're getting off topic. Tell us your story.
Okay. Um, so it has to do with I mentioned my wife said that she does not like, she had one rule. She's like, don't come to me first thing in the morning with evil or lies, and like very fair thing. Like no one wants to start their day with that. So I tried to respect it. This is probably literally around this time last summer, and around the Lahaina
Mm,
fires in air quotes.
yep.
Lahaina we honeymooned there. It was our favorite city in the entire flat realm we live in, and so like I think she was already kind of triggered and upset by that. But I go in there and I'm telling her how I really don't think it is what we're told, and I think it was intentional, and she gets triggered, like, and I'm not being soft about it. I'm like, I just had to tell you, and like, so we butt heads, and it wasn't anything major, but it was enough where we didn't settle it like in that moment.
Hmm.
And a lot of times when I'm upset or just need to think, like I'll go on a bike ride. So I'm like, all right, like I just need to go cool off. Got on my bike and I'm biking and biking. I get like 20 miles away from my house and I start praying. Like I'm upset. I'm going through all this with all these people in my life, but especially my wife in my own home. I don't want to be doing this. So I'm praying and I'm talking directly to God. And this is very new to me at this point. Like the only time I had really done that in my first 40 years of life was I used to be terrified of flying. And I would pray to God when I was getting on a plane because it's like, please God, let me be there safe. And so I'm praying to God and I'm saying, please help me. I don't know what to do. I don't want to be upsetting my wife, but this is important to me. I need to figure this out. So I like literally talking to God for one of the first times ever that wasn't getting on a plane. I keep biking. I get like another 10 miles away from my house. And I'm heading towards Lake Michigan because it's just where I like to bike to. If like it's a long bike, but it's where I was heading towards. And there's like a bike path the whole way, but there is a one section of this bike path where you have to get off of it and then go to a different section. And it's literally 20 feet. So that section of 30 miles, there's this 20-foot section where I'm not on the bike path and I get off and I'm on it and there's only one person and he's walking towards me and I'm biking and I have a flat earth shirt on and he looks at me and he says, like, I think it's flat too. And I like take my headphones out. I'm like, you being serious or are you just messing with me? He's like, oh no. He's like, I'm a photographer and I was photographing the moon photographing the eclipse photographing the sun during the eclipse. And I'm watching it and it's moving and it's just consistently moving and eclipsing the sun. And then it fully covers the sun and then it just paused there for 30 seconds. And he's like, there's no way that should happen. Like I was watching it move consistently. It should have kept moving at the same pace. And he's like, so that caused me to just question my reality. And he's like, I basically got to the point that where you're at, if you believe the earth is flat. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. Like we kind of talk about some things and like I make very small mention that I'm on my bike because I had an argument with my wife and we go back and forth. And then like I like noticed that he looks like he's traveling. He's got this huge bag and I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I'm walking to Florida. And like, I live in Florida now, but this is when I lived near Chicago. And I'm like, what do you mean you're walking to Florida? He's like, well, I've been a really bad dad. Like, and my girlfriend, the only reason I was here, and he was in Wisconsin. He didn't even live in Illinois. He lived in Wisconsin. And I ran into him in Illinois. He's like, the only reason I'm in Wisconsin is because my girlfriend, we just broke up. Like, I've been a terrible dad. I don't have my license. I don't have a car. I don't have money for airfare. So I'm going to Florida I just need to be with my kids and be a better dad. I was like, that's crazy. He's like, yeah. He's like, actually, I was trying to bike there, but my bike shat out on me like 30 miles in. So he's walking to Florida and I'm sitting there on this bike and I'm like, I was meant to run into this guy. So I'm like, buddy, you got to take my bike. I'm 30 miles from home. I'll figure out, but like, I'm like, you got to take my bike. He's like, I cannot take your bike. I'm like, please, like, just do me this favor and take my bike. There's no way you're going to make it to Florida walking. He's like, all right, I'll take it under one condition. And he says, I'll only take it if as soon as you get home, you hug your wife, you tell her you love her and you treat her like a princess and like, don't worry about all these beliefs. And I'm like, what? I'm like, are you an angel sent here to like, just give me this message? And then, so like, I'm already kind of blown away and we talk a little more. And then like, we had connected on such a deep level that when we were literally saying goodbye to each other, like we embraced and we both had a little tears and I hadn't gotten his name yet. And I was like, hey, I'm Tyler. What's your name? And his name was JC. So okay. So at that point I believed in God and I'm like, all right, so maybe Jesus is real too. And like, there's a message coming to me here, like directly from God. So it's just crazy. Cause like in 30 miles, those 20 feet, the only chance I would have run into him, he gave me the message I was looking for. It was just like a mind-blowing experience that, you know, I literally think God sent me an angel or just a message to help me through that tough time. It was pretty crazy.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. I love sharing that. I get goosebumps when I do, just because it was such a, you know, until that point or even the past year or two, like I didn't think things like that happened. I didn't believe in spirituality and God. And, you know, that's kind of why I do what I do, is because I want people to understand that this place is much more than we've been told. And one of the things that I think is so cool about it is that like I'm not afraid to fly anymore because I'm not afraid to die. I used to be afraid that I was going to die on a plane, but it's like, you know, this isn't it. Like this is a temporary time and I'm a spirit here chilling out in this meat suit. And when this time, when my time here is done, there's more. So there's nothing to fear but fear itself, really. And I know that sounds corny, but I'm a full believer of it.
Okay, I have one more theory I want to ask before we end our time together. So you've got lots of mask theories on your socials, right? So we've got Jim Carrey is playing Biden. We've got a couple people are the same, right? So who are the same people? So you have Tom Brady. Who's Tom Brady?
I think Tom Brady is playing Gary Busey, and a lot of people might not know who he is, but he's like an 80s, 90s actor. And I think the character of Gary Busey was just, he's someone that maybe doesn't even exist. And they put someone in that character and different people cycle through him. And I think, that's what they do. But Benicio del Toro, I think, is Brad Pitt, but I think other people play that role as well. And I know, for some people hearing that for the first time, it probably sounds completely insane, but I think I do a pretty good job giving some evidence that could be happening in the videos. It's hard to verbalize, though.
It is hard. I mean, honestly, when you're looking at the pictures, you're like, I mean, spot on. They're the same person. You just wouldn't even know. So
Yeah.
let's go to Jim Carrey and Biden because
Sure.
everybody likes to hear about President Biden. I did an episode on how he's cloned. Obviously, it just covered as did everybody that he's not running for president anymore. That he might be dead. So is he actually just dead and being played by Jim Carrey? Where did you come up with this theory, or where did you hear this theory? What happened?
So even before I knew any of the lies of the world, I remember seeing Joe Biden fall down the stairs walking up to Air Force One. And like in my head, I literally, like, I used to be a huge Jim Carrey fan. Like, I still enjoy his movies regardless of what I think of is going on with him. But like, he got Ace Ventura and those movies came out when I was like a freshman and sophomore in high school, teenage boy thinking this guy's hilarious. So I've literally watched all his movies multiple times. I've seen Dumb and Dumber probably 100 times. And I remember watching Joe Biden go up those stairs as like an 80-year-old man and falling. I'm like, I literally had a moment where I was like, that literally looked like Jim Carrey, like in his comedic falling. Cause like he falls all the time in his comedy. And I had that moment of it. And then fast forward to, however much longer after I wake up, and I heard just one person say it. It was like some lady being interviewed about Trump, and she made like a joking comment about Jim Carrey falling up those stairs. I was like, wait, like that resonates. Because I remember thinking that before, and I had maybe started thinking about like clones and doubles and things like that. And then as I watched that, I really think I have a decently photographic memory. So when I see something, like it just like it clicks. And I remember like, well, him falling up those stairs, that's, exactly what happened in Dumb and Dumber, the movie I've seen 100 times. And the more I kind of researched and looked into it, the more I would find an exact scene of a movie Jim Carrey had done and a time that Joe Biden had fallen. And like literally every time Joe Biden has fallen, there's an exact replica of mannerisms and hand gestures and even people helping him up that Jim Carrey has done in a prior movie or SNL or even in Living Color. So, it started small, but then I just kept finding the evidence. And I eventually got to the point where I was like, I don't even question this is happening. It's just all predictive programming because, like if you're past the initial level of thinking like The Simpsons actually predict things versus them just putting things in The Simpsons that are, predictive programming, then like, they do that. So yeah, it kind of happened organically once my mind was open to they're lying about everything. And what I don't think Joe Biden is dead. I think, and I literally was just asking my friend Josh on my podcast the other day, because he and I are like, we go tag team on these doubles, like the people playing multiple roles. He's been doing it. He's been awake since like 2015 doing it. Okay. But he found someone that he literally thought old Joe Biden, original Joe Biden, is now playing, because that's what, like, whether people realize it or not, that's what people, or they do, like they kill someone off because they don't actually die. They just change their roles. Because if you can have, say you have 1,000 people that know about the lies, that's harder to control than 500 people. So if you have, Brad Pitt playing 3 different Hollywood actors or 2 different Hollywood actors, that's a smaller number of people that you need to control to not spread the lie.
Right.
But Joe Biden, I think, isn't dead. I think he's playing someone else. It's a political guy that is literally like Canadian. It's like an obscure guy that I won't think of his name, but I don't think he's dead. I don't think, a lot of people think he died and that some ceremony they were like doing tribute to him. I don't think any of that. I think he's gone, and Jim Carrey took the role, and I think multiple people probably play that role. Have you ever seen the one where Joe Biden has like the chin that literally looks like
Yeah.
you can like push it? I'm like people, that has to be like some sort of awakening for people, but sometimes it's not. So
Because
yeah,
I've seen
go ahead.
like the ears. I covered this in my clone episode where his ears are either attached or detached,
Right.
and it switches. And you're like,
Yes.
okay, well, like, why would you not be consistent? Why would your ears switch like that?
Yeah.
That's very odd.
Yeah. Sometimes I honestly think a lot of it's just mockery, that they're just like, you guys are so dumb that you can't figure out that literally Jim Carrey, who you have seen in dozens of movies, is falling up the stairs going to the presidential airplane. And we're just going to rub it in your faces because you're too dumb and you'll believe anything. And it's almost like just a form of mockery to me.
Yeah, it's like a big movie.
It really is. It
It's
really is. And
so crazy.
sometimes I get really angry about it, and other times I just laugh about it.
I don't get angry about it anymore. I think I
Yeah.
did. I used to. I don't waste my energy on it. I'm like, you know what? They're gonna do what they're gonna do. And actually, one time I asked my dad, I was like, "What do you even do about it?" Like obviously, we're awake to all these crazy things that the deep state or whoever it might be, right? They're doing all these crazy things. The big they. What do we do about it? I was like, I'm just one person. I can't do anything besides like have a podcast and tell people about it. And he said, "You think you can't do a lot, but one mosquito in your sleeping bag can really ruin your day."
That's awesome.
And I was like, huh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. When I was probably around this time last year, I keep referencing that, but I was on a little trip with my wife and her brother, and we were in a hot tub talking about it. And he was actually like kind of asking me things, and I'm telling him, he was being inquisitive and kind and wasn't being rude like everyone else. And he's like, really though, he's like, what if you're right about all this? What are you gonna do? He's like you're just one person. I'm like, well, I feel like I'm going to start a revolution. I feel like I'm going to do a lot. Like I have this burning passion. Like I'm going to do so much. And this was before I even like really jumped on platforms at all. And I'm like, I don't know. I feel so strongly about helping people see this that I feel like I'm going to do something. And now like I sit here and like millions and millions of people have seen my stuff. And every day I get a message about how I've helped wake people up to different things. And so it's just, if you have the right mentality, yeah, all it takes is that one mosquito to stir up a whole lot of anger, or to wake someone up out of a slumber.
Yeah. I think the more that we wake people up, the better it is. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm sure that it will happen on your podcast. I get plenty of negative reviews on my podcast about like you're just spreading misinformation or you're just like they're like get so angry. I'm like, you came to a conspiracy theory podcast
yeah,
to learn about something that isn't mainstream. So like don't leave me a 1-star review because you didn't like what you heard. Like,
so I learned this really early on in my content creating, um, journey, is that there are literal AI bots that attack anything involving truth. And like I know this for a fact because I will make videos on TikTok, and like the second it is posted, like I know the second it's posted because like I'm sitting there waiting to copy the link. I'll
mhm,
already have like 15 negative comments, and I'm like, there is 0.0% chance anyone has even seen 3 seconds of this. But like they're there to keep people in the lie. They're there to, because
right.
like if your comments are filled with this is amazing, I learned so much, and then someone who's like kind of on the fence goes and sees that, they'll be like, oh, I want to listen and learn, versus, oh, I'm not going to waste my time listening to this person spreading lies. And Facebook is awful. YouTube is terrible. TikTok, like they all literally have AI bots. So I'm sure Spotify and all the podcasts are no different. So you're probably getting a lot more fake negative comments than you even realize.
Maybe. I don't know. I stopped reading the reviews a while
Oh,
ago because
yeah,
I get
smart.
really emotionally involved. I mean, I put my heart and soul into this podcast, and so I get so emotionally attached. And then if somebody leaves me a bad review, I'm like, what did I do wrong? But I'm not gonna change it for like one
Yeah,
bad person. They're not gonna come back and
yeah,
listen. So I
yeah.
stopped reading them.
I
That's not
like
true.
this
I read
phrase.
the 5-star reviews.
I like the phrase I heard recently: "Post and ghost." Like just get it out there and just don't even look at it.
It's definitely hard, but I
Yeah,
will share your podcast and like the links to your podcast, your Instagram, your TikTok, all of that.
awesome.
Obviously, I actually reference your videos often for some of my podcast information. I expand upon it sometimes. Sometimes I just like, this was what was shared here. Because sometimes I'm
Yeah.
just looking for something to include after I've
Mhm.
included a bunch more. I'm like, what else can I find about this? And I find your stuff. I
Yeah.
did that with
Awesome.
the Statue of Liberty. I did that with another one too. Well, obviously the Joe Biden thing with the Jim Carrey. But I always put you in in my sources, so thank you for helping me out.
Um,
I appreciate it.
Thank you for actually. So many people just steal my stuff and like erase any like sign of where to find me or anything. And it, part of that's karma too, because I did that once to a guy and didn't mean to, and he called me out, and I was like, well, dude, like I just care about getting truth out. I don't really care about getting acknowledgement or whatever. And ever since then, like it happens to me all the time. I'm like, all right, like karma's a bitch.
Well, and I try not to like steal people's stuff, but also like same right? Like I want
Yeah.
to give you the information.
Right.
Whether it
Right.
was this person's information or this person's information doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But this is what is being said about the this is what the conspiracy is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So but I always put you in my resources or my sources that are in my show notes, so I appreciate it. But I will tag all of your things in the show notes for this episode, that way they can find you, because actually several of my followers actually already follow you because they'll send me your videos sometimes and I'm like, I saw that, thanks.
It's funny. I actually, I've had a few different kind of funny stories. Like we're in this house we rented in Florida while we were kind of searching the state to see where we want to be more permanently. And we had internet installed, and the guy came in and he like kind of looked at me funny, and I'm like, just he was like 60 years old, and he just kind of looked at me funny, and then he came in and finished, and I wear my ice wall hat in all my videos, and
Yeah.
he saw that, he's like, I know you. He was like all excited. I was like, that's hilarious that my internet guy is like recognized me. And I've had a few other people that are like, say they're talking to their neighbors and they'll mention me. They're like, oh, you know that guy? It's just like, it's so new to me, like to have people recognize me. It's kind of funny still.
Well, if I saw you on the street, I don't know if I'd recognize you. I'm just kidding. I'm just
You might not. I had a guy the other week
sorry.
recognize me at a gas station. He's like, you're that TikTok guy, right? I'm like, maybe.
You're TikTok famous.
Like, yeah, that my friend Ben always says you're low key famous. I'm like, whatever.
I mean, basically. I mean, TikTok's like the new Hollywood, basically, at this point. So,
Yeah, yeah,
but thank you so much. I really
yeah,
appreciate all the
yeah.
information. Like, that was
Oh, yeah,
so great.
yeah. This is
Um,
fun. I had a blast.
Hey friends, The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Danny Mercy. I appreciate all of your support. Please rate and review wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at rabbit.holepodcast. And thank you, Zakar Balaha, for our awesome intro.